Welcome to Brian's Briefing, part of The Brian Nichols Show. I'm Brian Nichols, and in these focused episodes, I dive into key issues, ideas, and principles that shape our world. No frills, no fluff, just straight talk on matters that count. Now, let's get started. Today, we're going to talk about something that I'm sure you've all seen, and that is the dangers of groupthink, and specifically, the dangers of getting stuck in an echo chamber. But also, I want to talk about the irony of libertarians trying to get other people to become libertarians when it's libertarians who end up finding themselves getting stuck in this very groupthink. So let's dig into this. I always hear and see libertarians quite often going out of their way saying, we're the ones who are the adults in the room. We're the ones who do things differently. We're the ones who will lead. Why? Because we are the ones who are principled. And with these principles, we will use them to guide us. But then I go into libertarian Facebook groups. And in this specific case, it was a libertarian Facebook group that was arguing about libertarians and social issues, specifically LGBTQ plus issues. It was relating to the whole Olympics opening ceremony controversy. And I see libertarians there who are just full-throatedly defending the regime. Now, I'm using the word regime here in this case to outline more or less the accepted viewpoint, like the secular viewpoint from a global perspective. So when I go into that Facebook group and I'm challenging people, instead of these folks being confident in their ability to not just stand firm on these ideas and principles, but to understand how to effectively bring these ideas and handle objections that will inevitably be coming from folks like me in the real world, these libertarians in that Facebook group were entirely unprepared. And not only were they unprepared, they became defensive, they became emotional, they became irrational, and then they let the mask slip. And by that, I mean they put on this great persona. We are the adults in the room, we're better than all of this, we're talking about the issues that really matter. That's the perception. But without an understanding of what the real issues that really matter to real people who need to be able to be convinced in order to win their vote, that's where libertarians have been dropping the ball. See, and this is the part where libertarians are either just playing dumb or they are dumb, or there's something nefarious here at play. Because they like to be dumb in actual tactics, it seems, because they don't want to actually grow the movement. Like, some folks just want to stay in this little echo chamber. Like, you're going to get challenged. That's the whole point of libertarians going out and having these conversations. You're going to get challenged. And if you're going to sell libertarianism to folks who aren't already libertarian, guess what? You're going to get hit with objections. You're going to get hit with concerns. You're going to get hit with questions. And if your knee-jerk reaction, and instead of actually answering those questions or handling those objections before they come up in value statements, is just to simply react with your emotional knee-jerk reaction, where you just look at folks and call them irrational, or call them bigots, homophobes, transphobes, you call them all the names in the book, right? If that's your reaction, when somebody asks you a question or challenges you on an idea, you're gonna lose. No doubt about it, you are going to lose. Because you need to be able to sell your ideas. And this is the part where libertarians drive me crazy. Because they have this belief, and it's a foolish belief, a misguided belief, that just because their ideas, their principles are quote-unquote right, that people will buy these ideas, that people won't ask questions, that people won't give them objections. Again, going back to the past two topics we've discussed over the past few weeks here on Brian's Briefing, the non-aggression principle and action in reality, and then the rights of children in reality as it pertains to a libertarian society. Not everyone is libertarian. Not everybody's a good person. Not everybody thinks like libertarians, meaning there are going to be folks who, yes, will agree with you, but there's going to be a lot of folks who disagree, and for different reasons. Some of those reasons are valid and other reasons not valid. But it's up to libertarians to be able to be prepared and to respond to those objections, to respond to those concerns. Like, I saw somebody in that Facebook group that I'm referencing here who was tossing their hat in the ring like a month or so ago when the Libertarian Party was holding their convention, saying they should have been the vice presidential candidate with Chase Oliver, who is the current nominee for the Libertarian Party. And that exact person, that very person, they saw my post in the group, got so upset, so mad, that they put a lengthy comment about how wrong I was and how it's not a fair question for me to ask, and then they went out of their way to unfriend me. Now, just imagine if that person had in fact been the vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party and had gotten asked a question much like the question I raised, that was a valid question, but got asked that question by somebody who's, let's say, a potential voter. Or maybe they got that question by somebody who's, I don't know, part of the news. And what if that person gave that emotional, completely tone deaf, and frankly, stuck in this fantasy world perspective when they respond? You don't think that that would speak volumes to that potential voter? That would speak volumes to the news person or the folks watching the segment? To show how completely out of touch libertarians are? So here's my challenge to you this week, folks. I want you to go out there and actually engage with somebody who doesn't agree with you, but disagrees with you. And don't just argue, but try to understand where they're coming from. Practice addressing those common objections to libertarian ideas. Think through how our principles apply in complex, real-world situations. And for crying out loud, learn how to communicate effectively. That means study some persuasion techniques. Learn how to listen to people and actually hear what they're saying. Figure out how to explain libertarian ideas in a way that makes sense to regular folks who don't give a shit about Austrian economics or the nuances of the non-aggression principle. All right, now let's take a question from one of our loyal listeners. This question comes from John from Texas, and he asks, Brian, how do we engage with people who disagree without compromising on our principles? That's a great question, John, and here's the thing. Engaging with people doesn't mean you have to compromise on your principles, but instead it means learning how to explain those principles in a way that makes sense to other people. That means meeting people where they're at. So start by finding some common ground. Most people value freedom and fairness, even if they define those things differently than we do. And use that as a starting off point. And then, instead of getting all theoretical, focus on practical stuff. How would libertarian policies actually make people's lives better? Remember, it's not about watering down your message, it's about translating it into terms that connect with people's everyday concerns. So let me leave you with this. The next time you're tempted to call someone a statist or retreat into your libertarian bubble, take a second and ask yourself, am I really advancing the cause of liberty here, or am I simply stroking my own libertarian ego? Are we as libertarians really being, quote, the adults in the room if we can't handle tough questions or engage with people who disagree with us? Are we really champions of free thought if we can't handle a little diversity in our own ranks? It's time for some serious self-reflection in the libertarian movement, meaning it's time for us to challenge our own groupthink, to break out of this echo chamber, and to get serious about actually communicating our ideas to a wider, more broad audience. Because at the end of the day, that's what really matters. Not winning arguments on Facebook, not having the most principled position in libertarian theory, but actually increasing liberty in the real world. And that, my friends, requires a lot more than just being right. It requires being able to persuade, to build bridges, and yes, sometimes to make some strategic compromises. So let's step up our game, libertarians, and let's get better at talking to people, better at listening, and better at actually advocating for real liberty in the real world. Let's stop playing politics and start doing the hard work of actually changing minds and influencing policy. Because if we don't, and if we just stay content in our little ideological bubbles, then all of our grand principles and lofty ideas, they won't amount to anything in the real world. And that, folks, that would be the biggest betrayal of libertarian principles of all. So, This is Brian Nichols signing off. Remember, ideas are great, but it's what we do with those ideas that really matter. Until next time, keep thinking, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep working to actually make liberty a reality in the real world. We'll see you next time here on Brian's Briefing, part of The Brian Nichols Show.
Thanks for listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.